Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us today in class. Ricky Rocket is taking the day off. I just got a call from him early this morning, and he wanted the day off. So Ricky's fine. Anybody's taking today off, he'll be back next week. Joining us this morning, nurse Steve Elkins, and broadcaster. Welcome, Steve.
Hey there, Vinny.
Hey, Steve, I was thinking, last night I was at the dinner table with the family, and we were just having a anything goes kind of a discussion. Windows 95 came up.
Yeah.
And I looked at the boys, and I said, Windows 95 used to be really fast, blazing fast. And then one of the boys said, yeah, until you put antivirus software on it. I said, that's right. That's exactly right. Antivirus software, and then anti-spy software, and then you had to have a anti-spy bot running. So you had to have all of this software running just so you wouldn't get infected by these viruses and plagues that were developed. And I thought, I wonder how many versions of Windows there were. Well, I knew of most of them, but I didn't know of all of them. So I just wanted to mention this to you, and there's a reason why I want to mention this. So, the first version of Windows was 1985. It's called Windows 1.0. Then there was 1.02, 1.03, 1.04. 1.04 was 1987. And then there was Windows 2.03. 2.10, 2.11, 3.0, that was in 1990. And then 3.1, and that was called Windows for Workgroups. And then there was Windows NT 3.1, and then Windows for Workgroups 3.11, which was 1993, and then Windows 3.2, 3.5, Windows NT 3.5, Windows NT 3.51. Then we had Windows 95, and that had versions A, B, and C. So Windows 95A, Windows 95B, Windows 95C. Then there was Windows NT 4.0, Windows 98. Then there was Windows 2000. Then there was Windows Millennium Edition. And, oh, by the way, there was Windows 98 Second Edition. So it was 98 plus 98 Second Edition. Windows 2000, that came out in 2000, actually 1999. Then there was Millennium Edition. That was in 2000. Then there was Windows XP. That was 2001. Then there was Windows XP Professional 64-bit Edition. That was 2005. And then there was Windows Vista, 2006. Then there's Windows 7, 2009. And then Windows 8, 2012. Windows 8.1, 2013. Windows 10, 2015. So there are a whole bunch of Windows editions. And every time one of them came out, it fixed some problems and caused new problems. And whenever you got a new version, you had to get the updated antivirus to work with that. And that slowed the computer down. So you got your new Windows, everything's great, but it's slower. So you get the new antivirus, everything's great for a short time. Then you realize it slowed down, so you had to get a new upgraded processor, a faster processor. And then you needed more memory. So more memory, more processor, well, a new video card. And we used to be able to run the internet at 9,600 bits per second. Then 14,400. And then 19,200. And then 56,000. This is all dial-up stuff. And that, and today, and it worked. But what happened is we got more and more spyware, more and more infiltration, and we got more advertisements on the internet. So now we have these really fast processors in the gigahertz range, like 3 gigahertz and even faster, more memory, latest version of Windows, and it's slow with really fast internet. And so I've been thinking about this. And this is man-made. This whole mess is man-made. Because Windows, the early editions, worked fine. DOS was flawless. DOS would work and work and work. The computers lasted, the hard drives lasted almost forever, but when you got Windows, it beat up the hard drives and they didn't last more than a couple of years. So everything got worse. And we think it's normal to buy new computers. Right? Is that right,
Vincent,
Steve?
I think actually that the system was created with flaw in mind and backdoors in mind to create more commerce. I mean, just think about it. We have to all have antiviral software for our computers now. Now, I don't know about any hacks at the Pentagon or the War Department or anybody else getting hacked because they have the best systems. But you're not entitled to that same system that they have. Your system has to be penetratable because they want to see what you're up to. The system was built with fraud in mind and flaws so they can have access to your computer to see what you're doing.
Well, that's exactly the point. You said it so well, that we're not entitled to a system that works without problems. And so there's a whole industry that was built up around viruses and virus protection. And I kind of think that it's like this. You know, on one side of the street, there is the road paving company. On the other side of the street, there's the window repair company. And so they scatter this asphalt and stones on the road, and then as the cars go by, the windows get broken in the vehicles, and then we can get them fixed on the other side of the street. That's kind of what this is. It seems to me that the antivirus companies were on two sides of the street. I believe they were making viruses to sell their antivirus software that you had to have, and it's ridiculous.
Job security.
And it's infuriating to me that we have to do this. And the reason I'm saying this is we have a computer, actually several computers that run Linux. They used to work great. Now all of a sudden, you go to the Wall Street Journal webpage, and the screen grays out. The computer doesn't know what to do. It just slows down to a crawl, and it locks up. Now, why is it that the Wall Street Journal is doing this? Who are they in bed with that's trashing my computer browser? Who are they in bed with? And that's what's happening. You go to certain websites, and the computer just grinds to a halt. It doesn't happen on all the computers. It doesn't happen on the Windows computers, but it happens on the Linux computers.
Yeah.
So is Microsoft in bed with some of these advertising companies? Because if you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see it's loading this page, that page, next page. It's loading all these things. It hasn't gotten to your, the page to do your website yet, or to go to that website you're looking for. It's loading all this tracking stuff. And in my case, I say don't track, don't track, don't track. I have those settings set, and it messes me up. Now, if I said, hey, come on and look, have a nice day, it'd probably work great, but I won't do that. So now I'm at the crossroads. How am I going to handle this? Am I going to let these guys track everything I do because everybody else does? No, I'm not. I'm not going to do it. So Wall Street Journal, whenever I see there's a web page for Wall Street Journal, I go, I can't go there. There's no sense in going there. It's going to lock up my computer.
Yeah. With crisis comes great commerce, Vinny. And how many of these crises are actually created to bring about more commerce? A lot of it is. A good portion of it is create the crisis. Now here's the patch, here's the fix, which brings great commerce. It's always about the money. Always.
It really is. And, there was a guy by the name of Kiley. I forget his first name. Bob Chapman knew this guy, Kiley. And Kiley would always say, follow the money. Well, it turned out that Kiley was a crook. He was arrested. But I guess he knew really well that follow the money. Well, I just wanted to mention that about Windows, and they slipped it in. You know, they really did. They slipped in Windows with all these additions, and people just bought into it. And how much did it cost to go from one version of Windows to another? That was $89.
Yeah.
But then you had to get you had to get a subscription to the antivirus software. So it was $89 plus, and then, of course, you wanted Microsoft Office, and that was, at one time $89. And then every time they came out with a new version, it was another $89. So it was $89 plus $89. And then new processor and new memory. And then every 18 months to 24 months, it was a new computer. And they really had people hoodwinked. And now Windows 10, that's a subscription, right? Well,
just a heads up, Vinny. Believe it or not, your network, GCN, and Republic Broadcasting, and many other independent talk media sources are banned. You cannot be on a military base. The GIs are not allowed. They have no access to independent media. They are not. That started a while back. That started a while back, a couple of years ago. I can tell you that for firsthand. You can be on a base, military base, and they censor what their soldiers are watching or looking up online. Evidently, Republic Broadcasting and GCN and other independent media sites that bring information and debunk what's going on in the mainstream media is not to be viewed. You're not supposed to be thinking. You're supposed to be following orders, and they can't have their soldiers second-guessing them. So just let you know that we are being blocked on military bases.
Well, I know that we were being blocked back in the 1990s, and I'll tell you why. When I was a consultant for the public school systems, we built a server that sat between the Internet and the school system network. The network that I built was all wired, so it was not wireless, it was wired. And the server that sat between the Internet connection and all the other computers on the network, which were in the classrooms and they were in the library, they were in the computer labs, they're all over. This server literally filtered and blocked certain sites. And Norton Utilities, that company, the parent company, was the company that built this server software to block Internet sites. And what they did was they used a scoring system. So, for example, some words were worth, and I will say 100 points. Okay, so if a search term was put in with one of these 4-letter words, it was blocked. Okay, so some words were 100 points, for example. Other words might be 50 points each. So you string two of them together, you get 100 points and you get blocked. Other words might be worth 5 points, 10 points. So the idea was, depending on what you typed in or the search, you could be blocked.
Yep. And
not only were you blocked, when you logged in, this was the early days of tracking, when you logged in, the system knew, this Fortress software knew what station you were at, what time you were at, and the search term that you used. When we come back, I'll tell you a search that was used and what happened. It caused kind of a panic in the school system. And I was there. And I was one of the guys that figured out what happened. What a mess this was. We'll be right back. Steve Elkins is with us. He's a nurse, an ER nurse, ICU nurse, 27-plus years experience. He's a broadcaster on Republic Broadcasting Network. I'll tell you a little bit more about what Steve and I are going to do tonight in a few minutes, but I wanted to mention what happened. So we built this server to kind of keep the students from going to obscene websites in the public school system in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And this is a story of unintended consequences. So in the boys' bathroom, there was written something about a bomb going off soon, specifically on April 20th. Now, what's April 20th? Well, April 20th, 1889 is the day that Adolf Hitler was born. So somebody wrote in the bathroom that there would be a bomb going off in the school system, in the high school, on April 20th. So the superintendent found out about it because the principal mentioned it to the superintendent right away. I mean, this was alarming. It's a bomb threat. And so the superintendent notified me as a consultant and one of the employees who I was working with in the computer technology area of the school. We were the two guys that built the technology for the entire county, the school system. And so we did a search on that server that would be the internet filter. And so the first thing that we typed in was a search word bomb, B-O-M-B. So, for example, when was the word bomb used as a search term on any of the computers in the entire county's school system? And we printed it out. We found a ream of paper. That's 500 sheets of paper, 20 prints, 20 results per page. And we presented it to the superintendent. We said, this is what we found. And it was so much information. This was just, in the last couple of months that this had been found. But the interesting thing was that the search word bomb led us to someone typing in the following, quote, big, black, busty bombshells, end quote, big, black, busty bombshells. So somebody put in that search phrase, and the next question was, who did that? And when was that done? And on what computer? And we had it all right in front of us. It was done on the janitor's computer, the custodian's computer, in the elementary school, not in the high school. So then we looked at the login. So who did that? Well, that was a guy who was an employee of the school at night in the janitor's workroom. Think of it like a janitor's closet. Janitor has brooms and stuff in there to keep the school clean. A desk and a computer to track his janitorial schedule. And that's where it came from. And all fingers were pointing at the janitor, except he wasn't there. He left, maybe 7 o'clock at night, and this was done at 10 or 11. So who did it? Well, the login told us it was the guy who was part of the athletic department at the high school, over in the janitor's closet in the elementary school. He got fired. So why? What I'm telling you is, what you do is tracked. And we know it's tracked because we built the system to do it, but we didn't build it to track people per se. We didn't go and, hey, who's looking at what? We didn't care about that. But these are the unintended consequences of some guy writing this in the bathroom, the boys' bathroom in the high school, and it never happened. And the closest we ever got was to the janitor's computer. Okay? And it was a threat, or a scare, or somebody having fun. There was no bomb that ever went off. But the unintended consequences is the guy in the athletic department got fired. So if you think that this doesn't happen, I'm telling you it does. I was there. So, Steve, you can let me know what your thoughts are when we come back. Interesting.
Yeah, we'll do.
Yeah. Steve Elkins is with us, and what we're talking about, this bomb threat on April 20th, which happened to coincide with Hitler's birthday. We don't know if that was the reason for it or not, but it just happened to coincide with it. It didn't happen, and the point is, it was over 20 years ago, and we were able to track it and figure out exactly who put in what search terms when. And by the way, that's stored. That's stored until it's deleted, if ever. So if you think that 20 years from then, which is now over 20 years, things haven't gotten more precise, more accurate, and that since disk drive storage has gotten cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, if you think that your searches are not being tracked, I'm telling you they are. And we did it. I was part of it. But we did it for a different reason. We weren't trying to snoop. We were just trying to make sure that students didn't bring up pornography in the library or anywhere else.
Yeah.
And we prevented all that from happening. Steve, your thoughts?
Yeah, I've noticed that the word recognition algorithm software is ramped up quite well. I've done a lot of searches, and for some reason it always seems to read my mind of what I'm typing in, and it finishes it up for me. This is all being tracked. You're right. Searches are being tracked. It's all being logged in a memory. There's a little file on you, I assume. And you haven't even mentioned one really important software, very intrusive, that was created by the CIA. It's called Vault 7. I don't know if you ever talked about Vault 7. And this is scary stuff here, because what they can do is actually go into the back door of your computer, put incriminating information on your computer, then they get an anonymous tip, show up at your home, said, we have a tip, anonymous tip. Well, who's that anonymous tip? And it's just anonymous. And we have a search warrant, and we're going to look at your computer, and what they do to find is maybe somebody went in the back door of your computer, put a couple files on there from some child pornography or something, and they take your computer and take you, all because you were a whistleblower or you were a person in independent media that was telling the truth and disclosing the corruption of government. I'm quite concerned about this program called Vault 7. And not too many people talk about it, but it is there, and not being used against other world leaders and whatever. It probably is too, but it also can be used against American citizens, and I'm concerned about people in our industry who are, we're not profiting from this. I'm not getting a penny out of this. I'm doing it because I'm a patriot. I love my country. I believe the mainstream media is very, very bad at what they do. And so I dig a little deeper to find out the truth, and I reveal that truth, or I fill in the holes, the gaps that they seem to leave out purposefully. So I'm a little concerned that this program exists. We've seen how rogue the intelligence agencies have become. That we were reminded on that with Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and the whole Russian dossier and that whole funny thing there. But I'm concerned about that. But, yeah, you're right. They are seriously doing a lot of searches. They're doing a lot of data search and data collection and storing information on us. Now, I lived in Utah. Not too far from where I live, there's a big data collection agency up there just close to Salt Lake City. I think it's in Midvale. And nobody talks about that. What's the purpose, Vincent? What would be the purpose? Why does my government feel that I'm a threat? Why does the government feel their citizens are a threat? That they would need to gather data on you, collect it on you, and hold it in some hard drive somewhere. We haven't even talked about the cloud, what the scam of the cloud is all about. Your information up there is supposedly secure, and we've seen how many breaches in security from everywhere, all industries, except Pentagon and Washington. For some reason, they have the best everything. They never get hacked. But everything I have is vulnerable to hack. Why is that? How is that possible? That was created. There's a purpose behind that.
Yeah, and I drove past that data center. Mm-hmm. It's enormous. It is. Some of the criteria was, how are we going to cool all this electronics? That's a massive problem. How are we going to cool it? And there's a sign. There's a sign. If you drive up there, you'll see it. And it says it's the Domestic Surveillance National Data Warehouse. This is what it's called. The Domestic Surveillance National Data Warehouse. So they're literally saying that you are under surveillance nationally, and this is the warehouse for the data. Yeah. And there's a sign that says, quote, outside this building, quote, if you have nothing to hide, comma, you have nothing to fear, end quote.
Yeah.
And I've talked to people. I can't believe it. I just can't believe it. how many, I think they must have read this sign. And they say to me, well, I've got nothing to hide. I got nothing to hide. It's okay.
Yeah.
How dumb can you be? How dumb can a person be?
They obviously don't understand the Fourth Amendment. They don't. My wife and I were talking about this the other day, and I gave her explicit instruction. Police officers around my area are trolling. They're fishing. They're fishing for revenue, commerce, to make their budgets, and they're looking for every excuse they can find to look inside your car, to search your car. And I said, under no circumstances are you to say, yes, you may search my car. You have to have reasonable suspicion. You have to say there was a crime committed. You have to go through the right processes. We have a Constitution, Benny, that is hanging by a thread. It seriously is hanging by a thread. Law enforcement doesn't recognize it, and they're trouncing on it. And the legal, as far as the judges, are looking to side with the law enforcement. And I'm going to be standing by the rule of law here. And I'm going to say, no, you cannot search my car. Are you suspecting me of committing a crime? Then tell me what that is. And you're detaining me. If you detain me, then you have to have a reason why you're detaining me, or I am free to go. John Stadler and I talked about this, and there's an easy solution to a lot of this. When you get pulled over on these bogus pullovers to basically troll and search what they can find for revenue, you simply say after a certain point in time, can I leave? And they said, well, no. Then I'm being detained for a crime being committed, and you keep saying that over and over. Then you finally get to the point where you say, call your supervisor. I want your supervisor here right now. When you bring more people into the fold here is when they usually say, oh, okay, because they know they're trouncing on the Constitution, your Fourth Amendment rights. So you call for the supervisor. You make a stink. I want the supervisor. I'm not leaving. I want your supervisor down here right now. And that's usually when it stops. And people need to put their feet down on this issue here, because we are having our rights taken away from us. And we need to push back. We do.
Okay. I've got an exclamation point to make. You've met our boys.
Yep.
And you've met our family. Well, one of our boys decided to go to the Kansas City area we live near Springfield, 50 miles, 60 miles outside of Springfield. And he decided to go to the Kansas City area where there was a coin dealer who was going out of business.
Right.
So he hopped in his car, drove out there. It's about 3 hours. And the guy had all kinds of neat stuff that he was selling. For example, you remember those nickel, dime, and penny collecting books? They were blue, and they're trifold, and they have all the different years and mint marks. Well, the guy had a whole bunch of them, 50, maybe 100 of them. And he wanted to get rid of them because he was going out of business. He was closing his store. So he had no use for them. So our son said, okay, I'll buy those. And then he had these 2x2 flips, they're called, which are cardboard on two sides with kind of a plastic lens that you can look through, and you put your dime or quarter or nickel in there, or penny, and you staple it and you write down what it is, and that keeps the fingerprints off it for, sorting and collecting and so forth. So we bought boxes and cases of those. And then there were some books that the guy had, and he also had, so he bought a lot of supplies for the collector. Lots of supplies. And a trunk full. And the guy also had some silver certificates. And the silver certificates were U.S. Federal Reserve notes. And they said on the top, silver certificate. So it was redeemable for silver if you wanted, up until they pulled those off the market. So the federal government paid, I think, $1.06 for each dollar of silver certificate. So if you had one that was marked silver certificate instead of Federal Reserve note, you would be paid $1.06. And you turn them in. And people thought, wow, 6%, well, it's great. So they got rid of all their silver certificates. But some people kept them. And this guy had been collecting for years, and he had, a couple hundred of them. And they were mostly $1 denominations. Right. So he offered them to our son for about $1.06. So our son paid $1.06 for each, we'll call them silver certificate dollar bill. Right. So he had them. And So they put all the stuff in our son's trunk of his car. And the guy said, let me see if I can find something to put these silver certificates in. So he had an old suitcase, junky suitcase he was going to throw away. So he put them in there. And off our son paid him, and off he went. He was traveling on Interstate 44, and there was a sign that said federal or drug enforcement area ahead. And there was just a sign on the road, and then there was an exit ramp. And people saw the sign, slammed on the brakes, and took the exit ramp. They did that. The police were waiting at the exit ramp, at the end of the exit ramp, and everybody got stopped. Everybody got stopped. And then, as you went down the hill, you could see that there was this enormous traffic block. We're talking about stopping every car, truck, pickup on the interstate. And so our son waited his turn. There was a long, long delay while everybody got interviewed by the multi-jurisdictional task force. And this big imposing guy in a green uniform, not blue, not black, not brown, green, a federale. So this guy said to our son, you're not doing anything wrong, are you? Mind if I look in your car? My son said, that's a compound question. No, I'm not doing anything wrong. No, you may not look in my car.
Right.
So the federale says, pull over there. So there's multiple lanes of traffic stopped, gridlocked, and my son gets special treatment. They do the stare down. My son's got his window partially down. He's armed. He has his 1911 right next to him, which is perfectly legal in the state of Missouri, and on the seat. And this federale guy says, mind if I look in your car? Our son says, no. You may not look in my car, unless you have a search warrant. And the guy says, you're not doing anything wrong. You mind if I look in the car? My son says, no. And they do a stare down. And a little while later, they're staring at each other. Nobody's blinking. My son says, well, if I'm not under arrest, I'm leaving. And he slowly pulled away. So the Constitution of the state of Missouri reads the following, quote, that the right of every citizen to keep and bear arms, ammunition, and accessories typical to the normal function of such arms in defense of his home, person, family, and property, or when lawfully summoned in the aid of the civil power, shall not be questioned. End quote. That's what the Missouri Constitution said. So it was absolutely perfectly legal for our son to have a gun, carry it open, concealed, whatever his choice was, depending on whether he had a concealed carry permit or not. And think about this. What would the police do if they looked in his trunk and saw a suitcase? Do you think they would look in that suitcase?
Oh, yeah.
And what would they find in this little suitcase? A couple hundred $1 silver certificates. And silver certificates were issued by the United States government from 1878 through 1964. So this was legal tender. It was collectible. He had a small suitcase full of it. And what would the cops say? Where'd you get this money, boy? Would you say that? Would he say, this looks like drug money to me, boy? Do you think that it would be confiscated? Do you think that they'd pull him over, steal our son's car, steal the suitcase and the contents, steal the collectible books, flips, and other collection, coin collecting materials? Do you think that would happen, Steve?
Yeah, I do. I've seen it. It's called civil forfeiture, and you are guilty immediately, and you must prove your innocence. And for some reason, when they enacted that new law that you can only pull out $10,000 out of your bank account, because anything more than that would draw suspicion, because evidently you're working with terrorists or you're funding drug dealers or something like that. We're basically living right now, Vinny. We are living in a police state. We have a soft martial law that's in effect right now. And this civil forfeiture is so taxing to the person who's not guilty of anything other than having some belongings, some money, or whatever he's got in his trunk. I have a friend who's in the used car business, and he'll travel with $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 in cash. He'll go to these auto auctions, and he'll buy cars, and he was stopped. And immediately they assumed he has no record, nothing. He's a car dealer. He's got a card. And they took his money. He had to go to court and work very hard to get his money back. And a lot of times they make it so difficult that you just can't get your hands on it without spending more than the money they've taken away from you. And they keep it. Civil forfeiture. This is totally wrong. And it's happening quite a bit. And we definitely need to say no. That little saying on that building, if you have nothing to hide, then I don't buy that. That leads to the lead to other things of abuses on your rights and your rights as a citizen. Nobody's going to look at my car. You're going to go through the normal channels, the process, search warrant, and I'm just not going to open up and give you what you're looking for, because you do that, and I guarantee you they're going to find something. I think the police officers, law enforcement, has been taught that everybody on the street is to be thought of as a perpetrator, a person who's done wrong. Therefore, we can find revenue, we can find commerce, and I actually believe that's how they look at citizens now. We no longer have the peace officer. When I was a kid growing up, I loved our local police officer. Didn't call him a cop. He was a nice guy. We talked to him. I trusted the guy. He was a peace officer. There are no more peace officers. To protect and serve is no longer the motto for police. And everybody is a potential perpetrator. We're revenue. That's all we are. Revenue-based is all we are. And what we have going on right now is a police state. They don't want to call it that. They're just saying, well, we're trying to, catch criminals. Well, catch criminals. I have no problem catching criminals, but do it in the right process. Don't shake down everybody to catch one. That's not right. That's actually profiling. And if you're of color, you can definitely use that in your favor to go against them in court. But it doesn't work with whitey like us. But we are in a soft coup right now. A soft martial law is what's going on right now.
I was in Springfield many years ago, Springfield, Missouri, and there was a guy who worked at a store, and he helped me with a purchase. And there was the end of his shift, and I guess I was one of the last customers he had, and he was walking out to his car, and I was walking out to mine, and I thanked him, and we started talking. And he was a part-time police officer, and he worked at the store part-time. And he told me, we struck up this instant friendship, he told me that he was taught in these seminars that sweet-looking grandmother that you pull over for a traffic stop, she just might well kill you. And because of that, you've got to be ready to shoot her right then and there. We'll be right back. I'll tell you the rest of the story after top of the hour break. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Steve Elkins is with us, broadcaster on Republic Broadcasting Network, republicbroadcasting.org, 7 to 9 p.m. Central Time on Sundays. Off the beaten path.
Off the beaten path.
Yeah. And, Steve, before we get into what the police officers were told, the law enforcement were told, you want to mention what's going to happen tonight at 6 to 8 p.m.? You and I are going to be together. What are we going to do?
Well, it's going to be another USA Prepares type show. We're going to request that people call in. If they call in, it's only to enhance and better our suggestions, or maybe something else that may work better than what we're all going to discuss. But we're going to kick around a lot of do-it-yourself solutions to problems, fix-it-yourself, things like that. Things of the USA Prepares type nature of your show is going to be tonight on John Stadmiller's show, the National Intel Report. And I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. So
it's going to be a broadcast where you and I talk about tips and things that we've learned. Let me just give you. I sent Steve an email with like 50, 60 different items on it that we could talk about, and we're never going to get through it. I'm just, tell you that right now. So it's about this book that I've been writing, and I'm not trying to promote a book because I'm selling it. There is nothing to buy. This is just a book that I've written, or I am still writing, about things that I do. I want to make a permanent record for our family about how I do things. So on this list, there's a kilowatt meter. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about how to test batteries. We'll talk about a family pasta recipe, how to make your own hamburger patties, the best oil drain pan, how to start your own business, take the same tax deductions the rich take, why you should read Publication 17, what to look for when you buy an air compressor, 120 versus 240 volts, oil versus oilless, making your hand tools last longer, the best value ratchet wrenches, what brand are they, Craftsman wrenches versus Harbor Freight wrenches, battery desulfators, water wells, how to detoxify your water well, pulse oximeters, what kind of plumbing should you use for your toilet, how to change your own engine oil, what are the best pots and pans to buy, what about cast iron, what's the best vacuum cleaner to buy, what about making your own central vacuum cleaner system, what about an open bag of fertilizer, unopened bag of fertilizer, how about emergency lighting systems, 12 volts, shower doors, yes, no, shower curtains, which ones are the ones to get and why, why you should not drink water from the hot water tap, what about how hot water heaters are constructed, what about flushing a hot water heater, how do you do it and why, what about fuel filters, when should you buy gasoline and why, when never to buy gasoline, when should you buy propane, should you buy your own tank and why, how long do they last, what about gun safes, light bulbs, what about the orientation versus the life expectancy of light bulbs, what about reducing the overheating potential of your car, how do you do it, easily, almost for free, Formica countertops versus coffee mugs, jars, cans, pots, and pans, what about spiral-bound notebooks, what about turning store-bought pickles, good ones, into great ones with one step? What about water softeners? What about making your own heat traps for hot water heaters? What about installing a hot water heater? What's the secret? I'll tell you. And what about extra shingles? So the list goes on and on and on and on. So we're not going to get to it all tonight, but that's between the hours of 6 and 8 p.m. tonight on republicbroadcasting.org. So it's the John Stadtmiller's show. It's the National Intel Report, and Steve Elkins and I will be on that. And Steve's going to be asking me a lot of questions, and he's got a lot of comments as well. So
by the way,
if you're interested in preparedness,
I wanted to say thank you for sharing the pickle secret with me, the store-bought pickle. Because I have actually done that.
Well, is it true? Is it true?
It is true. It makes a store-bought pickle even better. I love doing that. My wife said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Vinny taught me this when I was up there at his house, so I'm going to do it," and it turned out great. So good secret.
Okay, so that's 6 to 8. And we're going to have some fun. And if you'd like to call in, you're welcome to call in. But as Steve said, please, we're not going to be talking about politics. We're not going to be talking about who shot JR. We're not going to be talking about off-topic things. If you have a suggestion to better what we have suggested you consider doing, we're all ears. We'd love to hear it. But please stay on topic. And by the way, that goes from now on USA Prepare. So that's just what we're going to do from now on. We're going to stay on topic. We're not going to get derailed. So if we're talking about science and you want to talk about religion, it's not going to happen. There's a little button that we have. It says drop, D-R-O-P. That means drop the call. Okay? Now, I don't mean to beat anybody up. I just want to stay on topic. So, Steve, last hour we talked about the police, and I mentioned that I met this cop. He was a cop that was currently employed, and he told me it was terrifying that he was taught that if you pull over some little old lady, be prepared to get shot because she just might pull out that gun and shoot you.
Right.
And so now the police, law enforcement on high alert, they're ready to draw their gun if they don't have it unstrapped already to shoot you if they think that they might be in danger. That's where they are right now. That's what they are being taught and have been taught this for years.
Yeah.
That's where we are. So what I'm saying is, you're right.
I've spoken about this a lot with John Stadmiller, and just for the law of averages, let's say when you have a big company, let's just say that in your big, large company, you have 10% of bad employees. It takes a while to figure that out, and you weed them out and you fire them and get rid of them. Well, let's say you have 20% of bad apples in the police force, and it could be even a little higher than that. I'm not even having to factor in the returning veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan who can't turn it off. They're trigger happy. They're looking to accelerate. They're looking to escalate, not de-escalate the situation. They're trigger happy. And I think we just saw one of those a couple of days ago where the female officer in Dallas, going into the wrong apartment, gunned down the owner of the apartment and now is using the excuse, well, I feared for my life. Well, you go into the wrong apartment, you kill the wrong guy, and now you're looking for every flimsy excuse. I'm really, actually, honestly, Vincent, I am rather fearful of being pulled over now, especially at nighttime, and where there's no witnesses to see what's going on. I really am kind of worried about that. I've actually purchased a camera now for my seatbelt strap to record. All you got to do is hit the button, and I record the whole conversation in video and audio. And I'm suggesting people might want to seriously think about that. They're actually very inexpensive. Amazon has them. But I'm not in that realm anymore where I used to say the police officer is my friend. He is a peace officer. He cares about me. I am a potential enemy to this guy. And I actually approached a police officer once, a little quick story here, at a library back in Windsor, California, for a community get-together with law enforcement about problems we had in our area with the high school. And I walked over towards an officer to ask him a question, and I kid you not, he kind of pulled back, stood down, and actually put his hand on his revolver as if I might come to attack him. And I stopped in my tracks because he basically told me to stop. And I said, I have a question for you. And guardedly, he allowed me to come forward, but his hand remained on the revolver as if I might want to do harm to him. I couldn't believe that. My wife saw that, and she said, what's wrong with this guy? I said, he is freaking out. Everybody is a potential attacker to this guy, and he shouldn't be in a uniform, and he shouldn't be in power and control, and he shouldn't have a weapon, a firearm. These are dangerous. Like I said, just take the averages of 20%, let's say 10%, but 20% or more of a force of bad employees. Well, bad employees in a workforce of working at GM means you get a crappy car built. A bad employee in law enforcement means you get people that can pull the trigger and kill innocent people. That matters a lot more than the guy who didn't put the nut and the bolt on. And I'm worried about that 20 to 25% or more in law enforcement who can't turn it off, especially these returning veterans who've been kicking doors down in other countries because that's the norm there. And they can't turn it off, and they do it here. And then you defend yourself because you think it's a home invasion, and guess what? They gun you down, and then they use excuse, well, you went for a firearm, but you were in my home. And you didn't identify yourself. You busted my door down. See, this is scary stuff, Vincent. This is very scary stuff. And for some reason, the legal profession is siding with the law enforcement, and the unions are siding with the law enforcement to say, well, he feared for his life. That seems to be the motto of the day, which you can say every time, is I feared for my life. Well, I feared for my life as the guy busted down my door, didn't identify himself, and I went for my firearm, and I'm gunned down. But I can't live to tell anybody I feared for my life. Scary stuff. Scary stuff.
I was in Las Vegas years ago at the National Association of Broadcasters convention. It was huge. And I happened to be with a group of other people. I didn't know them. I was just crossing the street. There's a traffic light that said, don't cross until, this little light comes on and tells you now you're allowed to cross. So there were a lot of people there. I didn't know anybody in this group of, this collection of people that were trying to cross the street at the same time. And there was a cop there in uniform. And I'm waiting for the light, and I thought, you know what, while I'm here, let me just ask this guy. So I said to this cop, so let me ask you, if you asked someone for their ID and they refused, what would you do? That was my question. His response? I grind his face into the sidewalk.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
That's one of the 25% I'm talking about right there. That's one of them right there. You just met one.
He admitted this. I'm thinking, I've been asked for ID, and my first question is why?
Right.
And one of the principal reasons why I left the corrupt Commonwealth of Virginia is I was going to visit my dad in the hospital, and I'd been on this highway. Actually, it's just 2 lanes, 1 lane coming, 1 lane going, for months because he was in surgical trauma intensive care. A guy fell asleep at the wheel, crashed head on into him, and he ended up being medevaced and hospitalized for months. Well, anyway, so I was on this road, my wife, my mom, and I, every day. We'd spend the entire day at the hospital, and in the evenings too, and sometimes overnight, many times overnight. Well, there was a whole bunch of lights up ahead, red and blue flashing lights, and I thought, gosh, this is a terrible accident. There's tow trucks there. What happened? It was a gauntlet, and everybody got license and registration. And when the state police said to me, license and registration, I said, why? Well, that guy was going to pull me out of my car window and pummel me because I asked him why.
Right.
And that taught me, I think I'm in the wrong location.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of the move out of the corrupt Commonwealth of Virginia to Missouri. Steve Elkins is with us. And as you were saying that, Steve, I was thinking about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. That's something that I think is largely an event resulting from what man has done to man. So, for example, in the Middle East, we send our young men and women over there, mostly men, to face unimaginable horrors. And we're not built to kill. I don't believe that man is built to kill. I don't think we're designed to kill. So when we go and do these things and we're forced at the muzzle of a gun by the military to go kill people, them over there, those are the kill them. Now, kill them. And if you don't, you're going to be court-martialed. So now you're in the middle of life imprisonment, failure to obey an order, and you may not think it's a lawful order, but if you don't follow orders, you're likely to go to the brig. Well, so these servicemen and women, some of them face these horrors and they come back with PTSD because we're not built to kill. However, my cats, our cats, they go to the barn, they find some mice, and they chop their heads off and eat them. I don't think any of our cats has a second thought about what he or she just did. But we do. So for cats, they are built to kill. They've got all the equipment, and they carry all that equipment around with them to kill. They're predators. Cats kill by design. We don't.
Yeah.
So then we get these guys who we've trained to kill. We say, you got to kill them. Those people are bad. So go kill them, and we give them all kinds of weapons to blow them up. They face the horrors. They come back, and they've been trained. Let me say it a different way. They've been trained to kill.
Yeah.
And then we say, now turn that off. Okay? Forget what we said. We didn't mean that. Okay? Because now you're home. So you don't do that anymore.
Right.
And some people can't find that switch.
Yeah,
to turn it off.
2 weeks ago, the Pentagon is actually kicking around an idea, Vincent, that they want to lower the age to enlist in the military from 17 to 16. Right, currently you can do it 17 with a parent's consent or a guardian's consent, but they now want to lower it to 16, so which makes me wonder, they actually have more wars planned for the future. And Mike Pompeo gave a speech at one of the academies, one of the naval academies, and said something about your future needs you. We are essentially, there are more wars planned. There is more friction, more conflict coming. you are going to be needed. So we're still on the pathway of war, never getting off the pathway of war. Well, war is profitable. There's not much money to be made in peace, but there's tons of money to be made in war. And I'm concerned about that. I've got grandchildren, and I think they're going to have a very, very bleak future if we can't get off this pathway of war. And Vincent, you haven't mentioned also that approximately 21 to 22 soldiers, vets coming back from the war zone, commit suicide today. Whether it's the PTSD or the atrocities, or they learned the truth of how they were used to fight these illegal wars, these nation-building wars, and they have a hard time living with it. So it's a mess. War is bringing more mess. It's bringing commerce, and those who love war and making all the money off of war love it. They want to continue on that pathway of making more money for future wars, but the society is taking a huge hit on what's happening in Washington.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about young people going to war, and I've asked former warriors, lots of them. I'm talking now. 10% of the Marines saw combat, and we have a number of instructors who were in combat,
right.
Various wars, various conflicts, and I've asked all of them. So, do you recommend that the young men in your family, the young women in your family, join the military? No one has said yes.
Right.
No one, because they were there.
Right.
Yeah. They were there.
Well,
they
think
saw
about
it.
the maturity level of a 16-year-old, 17-year-old. The maturity level. Look at these kids, 16 years old. Can you imagine that? Putting them in a uniform, put a gun in their hands, say, kill these people. You know, the governments, our government, all governments, they fight among themselves. Then they have their militaries fight it out on the battlefield, who's right and who's wrong. It's pretty sad.
Very, very sad. So, and we've said it here, if you see recruiters on your high school campus, as a parent, tell them to leave. Tell them to leave. Throw them out. Steve Elkins is with us. Steve, have you seen the impact of PTSD in the emergency room where you've been a nurse?
No, I can't really say I have, because I don't see law enforcement that often in there. No, and soldiers.
No, I mean, just
no.
just ex-military people who have PTSD, and something from the PTSD causes them to be in the emergency room for one reason or another.
Yeah,
have you seen that?
I've seen some behavior like that would suspect me to think that something happened in their past that was very traumatic that led them to be now combative and using violence as a way to solve their problems. I would say, I've seen that.
Okay. Have you seen, since you are an ER nurse and an ICU nurse, can you share with us maybe an unusual story that maybe we haven't thought of? Geez, there's a cause and effect, and this person ended up in the ICU without identifying, where or when. Something that might be unusual that we should probably pay attention to, maybe in our families?
Let me think here. Let me think hard. Because we're talking ER and ICU, and ICU, there's not a whole lot of talking patients in the ICU. They're usually on mechanical ventilation or something. I see a lot of dysfunctional families. I can tell you that right now in the ICU. You see that. And you actually see them in the ER, too. They come in after they're notified. There seems to be a growing number of dysfunctional families in this country, and I can't put a number on it, but there's a lot of inner squabbles with family. And for whatever reason, I don't know. But it's hard to find a family that comes in that's all on the same page, Vincent. I did find that more so when I lived in Utah. Of course, I think that has a lot to do with the religion there, the Mormonism, LDS, Latter-day Saints. They seem to be more unified together as a whole, as a family. But outside of Utah, I got to say, it's a circus. It's bad in the ICU. It's bad in the ER, and then you have the dysfunctional families to a point where you actually You have to call for law enforcement. Call for law enforcement. Here I am. Calling for security or law enforcement to have a guard at the door because of somebody may come in and do harm. I've not personally seen it per se, but I know a couple hospitals that I was at a long time ago, just not on duty at the time, where somebody walked in with a revolver and got rid of a witness in the ICU on a ventilator. And that happens. There's shootings in hospitals all the time. I mean, physicians get knocked off. And nurses, they shoot their way out of the ICU. I've heard of that. I've not been at the hospital at the time it happened, but I can tell you a couple of hospitals I've been at that's happened. It's a war zone out there, and it's a war zone in the ER, and it's a war zone in the ICU sometimes. And I don't know. It's getting worse. It's getting much worse. And I think there's very few families that are, the larger the family, the more dysfunctional I think there are. It's a war zone.
Steve, are you saying that there could be a person in the hospital, in the intensive care unit, mm-hmm. and in order to escape prison, they will shoot hospital staff to get out?
Yeah, I've got articles on it. I've got a whole stack of articles where I've used for talking about what's going on in hospitals and security and how we need better security in hospitals to protect us. And it happens. It happens a lot. Especially it's happened in California, around Southern California, L.A., and San Diego areas. I can pull article after article of how somebody went in to silence a witness against them in a case, and it's usually all drug-related, and shot their way out and killed a couple nurses on the way out and killed a physician, and it happens.
I've been in the waiting room of the emergency department or the emergency room at in Springfield, Missouri, and they've got armed cops right in the room. The cops have their own station desk where they can see everyone coming in, where they're seated. They can see the nurses. They can see the intake rooms. They can see everything, and they are armed, ready to take action. Yeah. In the hospital.
Yeah.
I don't remember that when I was growing up.
Some of your hospitals really get armed guards. I've seen some hospitals where they have the rent-a-cop kind of guy that has the badge and looks like an officer, and he's got a little stick maybe on the side or some mace or something, but it's not going to do any good with the guy with the gun. You know, you're taking the knife to the gunfight, and that's not going to work. But your larger hospitals in inner city like L.A., most of them, they all have armed guards. It's dangerous. It's a dangerous field to be in sometimes. Do your job and then worry about what's coming.
I've seen in Springfield from a seat in the waiting room. I've seen two cops run across the waiting room, run into the treatment rooms inside the hospital. And I don't think they're there to perform CPR. Right. They already have staff to do that. I don't think someone called 911 and said, "Hey, y'all got any cops that we can, we get this guy who's dying on the table. Can you all help out?" I don't think that's the case. I think there was something really serious where police force was called in to subdue someone. Does that ring a bell?
Oh, yeah, it does. I can tell you many cases. And that's why we have in the ICU and we have in the ER also, we have 4-point restraints. And they're soft restraints, or we have what we call the leathers. And the leathers are the serious stuff where we'll actually pretty much lean on you when we'll strap you down to a gurney and you can't go anywhere. And I've seen these people that are wigging out, schizophrenic on drugs, and there's no way possibly you can treat these people. They'll stab you, they'll anything they can get their hands on, they'll try to cause harm to you. And that's when that's what they call the officers, because they get a couple big burly guys there to hold them down while we put the leathers on and strap them down to the gurney. And then we have to sedate them and then figure out what the heck's going on here, what their reaction is. But, that's the job.
Steve, when I was talking with one of our instructors in the last couple of weeks, and he was telling me that When someone in their family goes to the hospital, they'll go to the hospital and they'll sit in that room with, the treatment room or the hospital room, if you want to call it that, and where the patient is, ultimately ends up, for a day or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it might be. And they'll have a notebook and they will take notes. Okay, nurse comes in. Hi, may I have your name? Nancy. Okay, Nancy. And so what are you going to be doing? Well, I'm going to be giving your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, an injection. Okay, so what's the injection? Well, it's XYZ. Okay, and what's the amount? That'd be 10 cc's. So the person writes down, Nurse Nancy, 10 cc's of XYZ at 10:39 a.m. Another nurse comes in. Hi, how you doing? So what will you be doing? And what's your name? Mary. And I'm going to be giving your family member an injection. Okay, what's the injection? It's XYZ. Wait a minute. We just got an injection of XYZ. Well, I'm here to get... No, it just happened. We already got one of those. Why don't you bring your supervisor in? So what I'm saying is there a possibility that kind of thing can happen where 2 people can be assigned to give the patient the same dose and they don't know about it?
Not only that could only happen if there's a pass off, like somebody goes on a break or something, lunch, and then did not do their medical charting correctly as far as the meds. But then again, the new systems they have set up now, that it would show up. You see, now they have a scanning system now. Most everybody has a scanning system, and that it's connected to your computer. And so it pulls up the medications that are due on what hour they're due, and you scan the bracelet, and then you give the medication, and it says, okay, give the medication, so it's cleared out. So that should not likely happen if the hospital has that system, that medication, system that they give the meds out by. That should never happen. What I do believe I should recommend people to do is put people of interest that should have access to your information on the Cardex. It's your patient Cardex. It's for you. And for legal aspects on it, if a nurse or somebody walks in your room and somebody's sitting there taking notes and they say, well, what are you going to give them? That nurse really does not have to tell you anything. Can ask you to leave the room. But then that's where the patient would say, well, this is so-and-so, and they are on my patient Cardex for receiving information about my health or whatever. And so in legal aspects, because there's some gray area here that they'll try to get out, wiggle out from, you need to have your name on that list, and it's right there on the patient records of who's given information and accessing information. So there's some tricky area there you got to be careful of.
Have you ever heard of death by decimal?
Yes, I have. I've seen it.
You've seen it.
I've seen it.
Can you tell our class what is meant by death by decimal?
Wrong dosage, lethal dosage. The decimal, too little could be harming. Excessive, the decimal the wrong direction, can give too much of a dose. You can kill somebody. And I saw a nurse. I came at the hospital at the time. It just happened before I got hired on in California. She was a fine nurse. She made a grave error in that we do a lot of flushes on central lines and for medications to make sure they never clot off. And she had made her flush with normal saline to flush the line, but she had also confusedly had another syringe that she was going to make her up her own potassium chloride bag. This is back before we actually had pharmacy making up those bags. We made a lot of our own IVs up. But there's a system you use, and you label one at a time, and you draw out the medication, you put it in the bag, and you label it right away, and how much is in the bag. And she messed up the syringes. She had 2 syringes, and one in her hand, the other hand, and she confused which one was which, and she mistakenly gave a potassium chloride bolus and then used the other syringe and flushed it through. And we saw a cardiac arrest, and the patient did not survive. it's a terrible thing to see or hear about. It messed her up mentally for a long time. I mean, she just had taken a life accidentally. But that kind of mistake, most of the time, well, you will end your career. You'll never be the same. You'll quit your career. You're done as a nurse. You're toast. She was a fine nurse too. Before that happened, she really attended. Just made a bad mistake. A lesson to learn to tell others, don't ever do that. And she went against policy. Maybe it worked 10 times for her, but this time she screwed it up.
All right. We'll be right back. So, class, what's different about USA Prepares is we bring real-life examples to you. Stories that are absolutely true. Things that no one else talks about, like death by decimal. And let me give you an example. So let's say you have a solution, a medication, and the amount prescribed by the doctor is 1/10 of a cc. So if a person were to write that down, that would be period 1 space cc for 1/10 cubic centimeter. Well, I would never write it that way if I were writing by hand. Now, we're talking about today we use computers, but before we used computers, we wrote things by hand. Well, if I were to write that, I would never write something as serious as a medication, 0.1 cc, because maybe you don't see the point.
Right.
And it would look like 1 cc.
0.1. 0.1.
Right. The way I would write it is exactly what Steve said. I would spend the extra time and put a 0, then a point, like a period, 1 cc. So there's no question that it's not 1 cc or 1/10. It is 0.1 cc. That's what I would do, and I know that's what Steve would do. I saw firsthand, I was in the room, when a nurse was preparing a fentanyl computer-delivered metering system. And she was trying to get the air out of the lines. And she squeezed the fentanyl bag and delivered a massive dose of fentanyl to the patient. The patient rose up and died right there in front of me. And I ran out into the hall and I said, "Code blue." I screamed, "Code blue, code blue, code blue." About 30 people showed up. And they came up with the that device with the paddles and the electric shock. And
Defibrillator.
Defibrillator, right? And it had the rod for the IV drip. But the IV drip rod was taller than the door frame. Couldn't get it through the door frame. They didn't know how to lower that rod. And there happened to be a doctor who had been walking by, and he heard it, and he ran in, and he said, "What happened?" And I said, "She squeezed the fentanyl bag and overdosed him." He looked at me, he looked at the nurse, and she said, "No, I didn't do it." I said, "Yes, she did." And I was screaming, "Yes, she did." He believed me, didn't believe the nurse, Narcaned her, him, the patient, and the patient recovered after a couple minutes, like 3 or 4. That's how long it took. Now, the hospital said that I would have to leave. I said, "That's not going to happen." They said they would call the police on me. And I said, "Here's what is going to happen." And what they did was they sent risk management down to meet with me.
Yeah.
Risk management, Steve, will you tell us what risk management is? Who those
risk
those
management
people are?
they're the people that kind of cover the rear ends for the hospital. They'll tell you that they're actually for patient care, and maybe some of them are. I can't say they all are all the same, but bottom line is many of them are to cover the rear ends, CYA, and of things that didn't turn out so well, and to kind of cover up the facts. So not all of them. I don't want to say all of them that way, but I've seen some of your larger hospitals, some pencil whipping going on, and things that didn't quite happen the way they said it happened. Mm-hmm. And by interpretation, they have the last word, you might say. They have control of the charge. So, I could see they came to calm you down, to feel you out, to see what you knew, what you saw,
Right, that's
if
what
you
they
might
did.
tell somebody else, you might report it.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, that's what they did. They sent two of them down. So I was in the position at a severe disadvantage because I just saw what happened. And they were going to tell me how it was going to go. And if I didn't leave, they were going to have me arrested. And I said, no, that's not what's going to happen. Here's what is going to happen. I said, murder. That's what I saw. Murder. And they didn't know what to say when I said that. And I said, you're going to be on the 6 o'clock news tonight. And I was furious. And I said, here's what else is going to happen. You're going to put that patient in an ICU room, and he's going to have a dedicated nurse, dedicated staff, and we're not leaving. We don't trust you. We saw you murder this patient. This is not going to happen. We're going to watch you, and you're going to be on the news.
Right.
They didn't know what to do with me. And I said, not only that, you are going to revamp your procedures, and I'm going to read them. And I'm going to see how you're going to change this so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Because I'm coming after you.
Yeah, that was a big mistake, especially when it's hooked to a patient. And what a stupid thing to do. You said, I like to use the word gross negligence, and usually scares them quite a bit too. But somebody did not follow policy. That was a dumb thing to do, to take a narcotic out of the register there and squeeze it to get an air bubble out. That was pretty stupid.
So, Steve, you and I are going to be on the air 6 o'clock tonight to 8 o'clock, 2 hours.
Yep.
Non-stop, almost non-stop preparedness. Things that you probably haven't thought of, class. I think you are going to be impressed by what you're going to learn, because we're going to try to do that. We're going to try to impress you with new information. 6 o'clock tonight, republicbroadcasting.org. Steve, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Vinny. Appreciate it. See you tonight.
See you tonight.